biggest mistake that a hiring manager can make is not taking the time to consider whether or not somebody is going to be a good fit with the other employees. And in the interest of giving good advice to anybody who's about to enter the workforce, if you're a normal human being, you will probably fit in just fine. But if you have quirks, you may want to consider hiding them. When I was at the pizza place, somebody was hired who just absolutely could not hide any of the things that were wrong. And it didn't take a real long time for us to start to realize we weren't dealing with the sharpest knife in the drawer. We're going to call this person Travis. It was getting time to start filling some gaps in the workforce at the pizza place. People's schedules were shifting around, and not all of us could be there for certain shifts. Believe somebody had been promoted to manager, which left a gap as well. And so we got somebody who superficially seemed to be a really good hard worker. He came in, he had a lot of experience, and we just kind of gave him some space to show us what he could do and how well he could do it. And right away, things started to go off the rails. One of the things that really stuck out as a red flag was this guy's tendency to fall back on his prior experience. So he had at least 15 years as a carpenter. He had about 10 years working in a lumber yard. He'd done roofing for 8 years, things like that. And we started keeping a running tab because he was only like 21, 22 years old. But somehow in his 20 odd years of living, he'd racked up like 40 or 50 years of experience. Chronologically, this wasn't like stuff stacked on top of each other. We just started doing the math and realized there may have been some exaggeration going on. He also said he was from the mean streets of a big city, so he knew how to throw down. At one point, he decided to lecture me, as a matter of fact, on the best strategy when you think you're about to get into a fight. You should immediately strip naked, because that's an intimidation factor that usually wins you a fight. He'd spent some time in prison, apparently, because one night we were making balloon animals out of the rubber gloves or doing some stupid shit. And he came up in the middle of nowhere and told us how it was possible to make some sort of sex toy out of a rubber glove, and gave us this word, Fifi, that we really didn't want to know, but he's like, it'll serve you in a pinch. Yeah. The only response that we could think of was, if you don't act weird, if you don't act like a complete imbecile, most human women will allow you to be around them. So maybe teaching us how to make this apparatus is a bit premature. But he was also unflappable. No matter how sarcastic we got with him, he just did not seem to take any offense at it, which was nice, because the weirdness just continuously escalated. I mean, there was not a day where I came in and didn't get some story firsthand or secondhand, like a server walked in on the end of a conversation he was having that was punctuated with, and that's how I ended up on the sex offender registry. So, yeah, we just kept trucking along, and he started telling me about his various interests. And apparently, he's also an amateur geologist, among other things. He goes around taking soil samples and was predicting an earthquake at the New Madrid Fault, which pretty much anybody could predict. But I guess I have a higher bullshit tolerance than most people, because I just was able to kind of nod my head and listen, and typically let him ramble on until he finished with what he was doing. Um, he did make a fatal mistake at the pizza place, though. Yesterday, I said that the owner of the restaurant does like to take advantage of any idle time and get people doing other things while they're on the clock. Well, this guy was expecting to work full time plus overtime and presumably any additional odd jobs. And he ended up doing several different remodeling and roofing projects for the boss. I remember him being up on the roof of the pizza place for days at a time, hours at a time, barefoot. He'd come in and try and show me his feet, which was a hard no for me. Gonna be honest, I had no interest in seeing this gentleman's feet. And he would gripe at me, like, I just done like $30,000 worth of work for $8 an hour. I don't know. I know my worth. Ain't worth no $8 an hour. It's like, well, why did you tell him you were willing to do the work and then accept the work when he gave it to you, knowing you could charge him at a different rate? Well, I didn't want to rock the boat. By the same token, he's badgering pretty much every manager there to learn every job so that he could be made manager within a couple of months of getting hired there. And all the people who were managing that place and stepped into it had been there at least a couple of years or more. So he didn't have a lot of friends there. And I was still able to kind of listen with half of a sympathetic ear until one day when we were working in the kitchen. I think he was doing food prep or something, and I might have been helping with dishes or restocking the pizza line. I don't remember what, but we hadn't known each other for more than a couple of months. Comes right up to me and says, "Where's the craziest place you ever got it on?" I was like, I like to think of myself as a polite person, so I don't have a tendency to kiss and tell, Travis. So I'm just going to take a pass on this one. Make up whatever you want to think was the craziest place I ever got it on, but we're not having this conversation. It's disrespectful to the people I've dated. And he's like, well, I got it on at 4th of July. I was over at Station Apartments. I was dating a nympho, man. He didn't even get the point that I really didn't want to hear this and was trying to politely extricate myself from the conversation. But, man, she got it on. We pulled down the curtains, and there I was, naked as a jaybird, ready to go. He pointed at his crotch as if I couldn't figure out what he meant with his cleverly disguised innuendo. And it just got weirder from there. It was like, and her baby was in the bedroom with us and in the crib, and we were just getting on. I could not get. I was like, girl, you're gonna wear out the snake, Jesus, Marion Joseph, man, don't you have any dignity? Go tell anybody else in the restaurant, but please leave me alone. I'm actually trying to work. It's like, this is the kind of good camaraderie building talk that people get into. And I'm thinking, I've been here 2 years and none of us have ever had any sort of conversation like this. You've known me for less than 6 months and you're telling me things about you that I wouldn't have asked to know in the first place. And he was a close talker too. He would get right in your face. He just had this look about him, kind of reminded me of Popeye. His jaw would thrust out, he'd squint with one eye, and he'd just get right in your face and let you know all the problems of the world. But, God, this guy could brag. And he was always telling us all of us about how his hands were just impervious, tough from all the carpentry and tinkering and woodwork and everything else that he'd done his whole life. He just, hands were impervious. And he even said it to one of the other people there, I love pain. I'm practically addicted to it. So getting hot pizzas out of ovens, you are going to get burned. It happens a lot. I mean, I don't think I have it anymore, but I had a scar on my left bicep from a hot Chicago pizza coming out in a pan that I really didn't want to drop, and all I could do was catch it on my bicep and kind of shove it back into the oven. We had a spring that assisted the closing of these pretty heavy doors. They're soapstone lined ovens, and all of us had burns across the backs of our hands from where the oven door would drop and catch us. And one day Travis apparently kicked up a row over something. I had no idea this situation occurred till I showed up, and I wasn't quite overtly singing his praises, but I would defend certain things he did, because he did work pretty hard, and the guy could really make good dough. He really understood how to kind of adjust on the fly if the day was more humid or less humid. But good dough does not a good coworker make. So he's working on the pizza line, and some incident occurred where he either grabbed or touched a hot pan and burned his thumb in such a way that he was forced to call his mother to bring him burn cream. And at this pizza place, we do have burn gel of some sort. I know it's got some lidocaine in it because I spilled a bunch of it on my feet once and couldn't feel them for like an hour and a half. But that was pretty much the beginning of the end of any modicum of respect anybody had for him, because he made it theatrical as hell. Called his mom, had his thumb all bandaged up, and I got this secondhand from the people who were there that it happened, and then got it firsthand from him when I showed up. And they don't believe in reports around here. That was an OSHA violation. That was a safety violation. I'm like, what the fuck was the violation? Everybody knows when pans come out of the oven, they're hot. You grabbed it. And I just don't know. There should be a report. Workers' comp. For what? Your thumb still works? I wish you'd burned your mouth. Maybe you'd shut the hell up. So I had to listen to him piss and moan about that the entire shift. And still, he hung around. I don't understand why, if he had all of these amazing skill sets, he didn't move on to greener pastures. But I started to get an inkling from communicating with him that he has a syndrome that a lot of people suffer from. And the diagnosis is really simple. See, everywhere he's ever worked, the managers always had a major problem with him. He was always the model worker, would show up early, go home late, do anything they asked, work his ass off for him. And he knew his worth. He would remind you that. He would always get in your face and tell you, I know my worth. But the managers always had a problem with it. I don't know what part of his personality could have possibly triggered people to take an immediate dislike to such a hard worker who spent, at least 30% of the shifts I work going off and having a cigarette. And he was one of those few who still smoked actual burning things instead of using some kind of piece of technology. But what finally ran him off was that he just felt that he wasn't getting any respect. He knew he was going to be a manager over at rallies as soon as he walked in the door, and they just weren't giving him raises fast enough and respecting the work ethic that he brought that extended to house cleaning and remodeling and all this stuff that he could have actually charged for, but didn't. He was perfectly content to take his wages as a pizza line slash cook line slash sometimes fill in as dishwasher guy. And he just couldn't handle it. This guy from the war torn streets who reminded me that he and members of the military got along really well because they respected him. They could tell he was a warrior too because of his time on the mean streets. There was that mutual respect. The same guy who didn't really care to wear hats but wore a do-rag until he was told not to. He assumed it was because the boss just didn't like his thuggish gangster attitude, but I mean, it was just the dress code there. Sometimes you got to say yes, chef, to move along in the world. It's okay, it doesn't hurt. But yeah, that's the story of Travis. He ended up leaving just before Christmas. And I, of course, and people give me shit all the time for being too nice. Doesn't cost anything extra. Told him if he ever wanted a reference, he was totally okay to use me. But I guess I may not be as nice as people tend to assume, because I never gave him my contact information. And if you knew the guy, you would understand. So watch out for the Travises that you may end up working with. They may still give you a good story, though.